Men have the luxury. They can have long sideburns. They can have mustaches. They can have a goatee. They can have a beard. I can see now, because I've never been into beards. I don't like guys with beards. And here I am with a beard. You know, there's all sorts of ways that they can play. I didn't get a chance to do that for how many years? My cliche is, I make a great man because I've been a woman.
Kind of give everybody an idea of what your film is and what it's about.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Hannah Saidiner. I am an animator and illustrator. And for the film that I made that's in Slamdance now, it's an animated documentary about my dad and his transition. So I grew up with two moms. I now live with my dad. And, you know, over the course of my college career, he began transitioning from female to male. And so as I was sort of making all this artwork alongside, you know, my artistic like evolution and changes, I was, you know, witnessing his evolution as a person. And so it sort of felt like a film that I couldn't, you know, I had to make it because I was making all these personal documentaries. And then it came to make a thesis, and I was like, this feels like the most important thing somehow to me, that I've been thinking about a lot, that I care a lot about. And so it just felt like a great way to just sort of talk about this conversation we'd already been having between us, and then make it into an artistic piece of work.
This is a really important program for Slamdance. This is something that they're really known for, and putting something like this out there is really great. And they kind of blend everything together to kind of have this framework that everything strings along to everything else. And this film especially is kind of a neat little escapade into that hope and tolerance issues and those that idea. From your perspective, was it important to be authentic with your thoughts as much as it was to be authentic with the conversation that you were having? Because you do give a lot of your own personal thoughts to this piece. And so was that something that was very important to you, that you needed to make this film whole?
Yeah, I would definitely say that as I was having the conversation with my dad, we sat for like 5 hours in like Thanksgiving-ish of 2019, and both of us can talk like nobody's business. So it was very easy to just have like a conversation going.
Yeah.
And when I wrote out the questions, I was actually just talking about this the other day. I made like a mind map. And so instead of writing out like specific things I wanted to ask, I was more just writing down things that I'd realized we talked about a lot. And so then it was just in the moment being like, okay, we're going to reflect on these last 2 or 3 years that we've been, you know, talking about these things. And like, we can talk about how we feel now and how we feel like it'll be in the future. Because even between like beginning the making the film and now, he's had more surgeries and, you know, things have changed and gotten better, you know, legal things have changed. And so it was definitely like acknowledging an evolution of himself, of our relationship. And children always like look at their parents with awe. I think like they're always just like the best person in the world. They're always the person they want to be like. And so being able to see him feel so wonderful as like time was going on, it was like infectious, but also just like I wanted, you know, I think with any change at all, regardless of what it has to do with, there's always like a little adjustment period.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be honest with the fact of like how my brother and I felt, how I felt, like the ways that he and I would talk about it, and the ways in which, you know, I needed to learn and grow and understand. And that happened basically through just us like always being there for each other, honest with each other. And truly this conversation just kept happening. This one was just recorded. So
yeah, there's a really great moment where you talk about how your brother corrected you using the wrong pronoun and that kind of thing. I really found that that was very earnest, and I think that just lends itself to the love that was created from this. So it's really well done in that respect. You know, talk a little bit about people don't. I mean, people look at this animation and realize, you know, oh, it's only 7 minutes long, you know, and how hard, if somebody can draw like that, could it be? But I'm guessing that this is probably 6 to 8 months of work, if not longer. So tell everybody a little bit about that process and how tedious and meticulous creating something like this can be, even rotoscoping it like you did.
Yeah, definitely. I joke with myself sometimes. I'm like, am I cheating if I'm rotoscoping? I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think it still counts. But through a lot of my work, I've used rotoscoping because I honestly think that I'm better at the design aspect than I am at really thinking through the motion. So that was just my reasoning for that, where it's like, it is, for my mind, I can understand it better if I have like a camera that's already done it for me.
Yeah.
And so that's the rotoscoping part. But then in terms of making it, yeah, I mean, I started like ideating it in 2019, which was God, it's like the years all blend together now, in my junior year at CalArts. So I was working with my mentor to sort of come up with the idea of how I wanted it to look. And honestly, like the interviews were kind of the easiest part. So then it was the animation where I was like, okay, oh God. But once I started working on that, it was a process of like, what do I want it to look like? What do I want, you know, the visual representation to be? Because with animation, it's like the sky's the limit. I could have made it. There was a point in time where I was like, it's going to be very representational. It's going to be like metaphorical. And I was like, when I was talking with my mentor, we were like, does it feel right? Because it sort of feels like separate from the story and you want it to really feel connected. And showing us and showing like the texture within it just felt like a focus I wanted to have within the film, right? Like it's watercolor and colored pencil, which inherently just feel tactile. And like if we're talking about bodies and the way that bodies change, like skin and hair and like there's everything involved in it where you're like, it always has this feeling attached to it. And so it's, you almost want to reach out and touch it. And that's sort of the feeling we wanted to get with, or I wanted to get it with the visuals of it. In terms of how long it took to make it, it was probably in total like spread out 6 to 8 months, and it was all throughout the pandemic. So whereas normally I might have been working in like, we had workstations, you know, at school, it was like, okay, my dining table is now my animation table. And, you know, I had a drawing tablet from the school. And so I was using that to like, I basically animated everything twice because I rotoscoped it digitally. And then I was like, no, but I want it to be physical. So I printed out those frames, flipped them, and then on a better piece of paper that was thicker, I would actually do the watercolor and colored pencil. So it was basically like I said, doing everything twice. And I was really lucky that I got help from a fellow student of mine at CalArts, Eva Leibovitz, and she did an amazing job like helping me with my digital animation, like helping me move on to different parts so that if I was behind, I could sort of know that she was like picking up some sections. And even my brother was doing a little bit for me because I moved home and I was like, hey, if I pay you a little bit, like, will you trace this for me? You know, like I wasn't asking him to come up with anything. And so it really made it like a family process, right? Like my dad was right in front of me while I was making it. My brother was drawing some of the things. So it was definitely tedious, but it was, and I even went past when I graduated a little bit, I needed to do a little bit more, but it was really great because it felt so collaborative in the way of just having people who cared just as deeply as me about it, helping me make it. And so that just made it feel like, I don't know, all the better for making it.
You know, the interesting thing about the documentarians that I always crave and find with this, with especially when it's about a subject matter that they're very passionate about and very keen on, and having an idea, like you said, you wrote some questions to kind of bring into this to kind of get this thing going. But the interesting thing that happens with this is as soon as you start to film, as soon as you start to get the interview down, as soon as you start to follow the subject and they become more open or they become less open, or in this case, it was more open. But in that idea, the documentary itself becomes like a flame and it breathes a different life and has its own life, and it decides to go wherever it goes and get as high as it wants and low as it wants and do its own thing. And then you're stuck with, okay, did my narrative just completely change? And I'm curious if that happened in this instance, or were you able to kind of control, like you said, you mapped it. So were you able to stay true to that outline, or did it have a flame to it at some point?
Yeah, definitely towards the beginning. Because it's animated though, I definitely had to have a point. And I was working with a sound designer and a composer. There had to be a point where it was like, this is the animatic, this is what it is, and it will now be animated. So it was kind of nice to have that, because I was like, all right, at that point, I'm making it. Like, that is what it is. But before that, it was like, okay, I have the interview. I have an idea of what I want these moments to be. I wanted it to be moments, these fluid transitions throughout. And the part where it really felt like the freedom to create and the freedom to like let it be what it was figuring out those moments. And so genuinely what I did, like on this wall, I had post-its up and I was just writing down things of like, we go out for dinner together a lot and we'll just sit and talk. And he used to be a hairdresser, so he cuts my hair. And so like these specific, really like intimate moments that I was like, which ones fit where? Because none of them are directly speaking about one, except maybe for like the birthday section or things like that. But I was sort of trying to find things that felt like what was being said, but just sort of the energy of it rather than the description of what we were actually talking about. Because everything that we were talking about felt like very emotional, and it was never really describing, except, I mean, there were a few sections that felt really tangible, but for the most part, it's like so much of just like how we feel. And so that was sort of an interesting part of like, how do I make that feel like a grounded visual? So that part was definitely like moving the post-its, writing down different ones, putting them together. And I had a really great critique class at CalArts to be able to come in every week and present and be like, here's how I feel about it now. What are we thinking? Does it read well to you guys? Because if I was just doing it myself, I feel like I just would have been like, I don't know, like, I think so. Because it can get so insulated. And so being able to ask everyone felt really great. And there's some other fellow documentarians in my class who were super talented, as well as everyone else. And so just having the understanding there was really, really great to get to like bounce everything off of.
Yeah, especially as personal as this was. I would imagine you're so inside of it at that point.
I was living here. He was right there. He was watching me. It was truly like, is this not my life that I'm
right?
Drawing? Yeah.
Wait, when did this turn into a biography, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, one last question for you, and that's, what do you love about indie film? What is it about independent film that you crave, that you keep coming back to it? And I got to imagine, as an animator, you have so many choices to make and opportunities. So what is it that you love about indie film that keeps you coming back to that?
Yeah, I sort of fell into it, honestly, by taking animation classes in high school and learning about experimental animation. And then even just the idea of documentary animation as a whole. And it felt like whenever I was looking at the people who I admired most in that field, it was always people going to film festivals. It was people, making shorter versions of work that were more experimental, that were able to talk about nonfiction stories. Because I don't think I'd ever seen like a feature nonfiction animated film, or like a big blockbuster nonfiction animated film, like anything like that. And so finding the shorts in that genre and talking to filmmakers, having them be like my teachers, genuinely, who I would go and learn from, it was like, okay, this feels right for the kind of work that I wanted to make. And so I just felt like I was very embraced by it. It was something that I was like, these people, they feel like they get me and the work that I'm making, and I love it. And so it feels almost like a wonderful accident, right? Like, I'm making this work and it happens to fit in this genre, and I'm grateful to be here.